Hello everyone, welcome to the February 2017 project of the month titled It's a Cover-Up. This is Kathy Ferrel, National Educator with RNK Distributing, coming to you from wonderful Windsor, Colorado. In this month's project, you're going to be creating a custom appliance cover. The instructions are given for a standard KitchenAid 5-quart mixer. The project at a glance, make sure that you download the February free designs, which includes your project. The free design this month is from the Stick Figure You Design It collection. So you see that showcased here. The You Design It tool is a proprietary tool in Floriani software. There is nothing on the market that is even similar to this tool. With this tool, you bring in a You Design It collection, and the tool allows you to mix and match all the variable pieces within that collection to create your own custom embroidery design. Also included is your handout with the project construction information, including software information and how to actually construct the project. The objectives for this month's project are, number one, we're going to be working with backdrops. So you're going to create a pattern from a backdrop. In other words, to break that down, you take a photograph of an object, you bring the photograph into the software as a backdrop. We're going to scale the backdrop, and by that, we're going to resize the backdrop so that it is an accurate size. Once we have done that, we will adjust the backdrop transparency, just making a little bit lighter so that we can trace over the top of it. We will digitize an artwork shape, and this is how we're going to create our custom pattern. And then I've included a software challenge this month, and it is to create custom artwork to create your own embroidery design. So this is a software challenge. It is not detailed. Within the handout, I have included a video at the end of this. So if you go all the way to the end of this month's webinar video, the very end includes a video in the software where I actually do the software challenge for you. The materials that you'll need for this month's project, of course, is your Floriani FTCU software. Your Floriani free design is included in the February 2017 project of the month. So when you download your February free designs, you will actually also be downloading the free design for February 2017 and the handout for the lesson. Within the handout is a detailed project supply list. I try to include all of the materials that I can think you might need. First of all, when it comes to the software, I think that a confident beginner, I really try to create lessons that beginners can successfully complete. You might need to get a little bit of help for it, but I think that any person should be able to complete the software component of any of these projects. When it comes to the sewing level, I would say beginner to intermediate. I don't think you need to be an advanced seamstress, but I do think you need to be familiar with basic sewing concepts. Also, if you are an inexperienced sewer, you may want to purchase a professional pattern. I created my own pattern. I've been sewing enough that I knew what I needed to do. It's like I need these particular parts. This is how I'm going to construct it. If you are not comfortable with that, I would recommend that you purchase a commercial pattern and, create your fabric and then follow the instructions within the pattern for that. Your software component, of course, includes adding a backdrop, resizing, and creating applique from artwork. Your materials, Floriani Dreamweave Ultra. This is what I use as a fabric prep. So before I embroider the fabric, I fuse Dreamweave to the back. This just increases the thread count of the fabric. It does not change the hand of the fabric, but it makes my fabric behave really, really nicely. So when I start embroidering on it, it really helps to decrease the puckering and distortion and anything else that I might get. We're going to use Floriani Template Tearaway. In this project, it's one piece of fabric with multiple designs, and Floriani Template Tearaway, I feel, is the key to accurate placement of those designs. You'll need your embroidery threads. I did not specify the colors. You will select the embroidery threads that best suit your project, your fabric, your decor. I also included Floriani Swarovski crystals. I love crystals. Floriani dealers do have the ability to carry our hot fix crystals. If you're using the hot fix crystals, you'll also need the Floriani cordless crystal tool. This is fairly new. It's wonderful. It's battery operated. It gives you instant heat, and you don't have to drag the cord across your project as you're trying to embed your Swarovski crystals onto your project. Also, Floriani chrome needles, the standard 7511 for the embroidery. I also swapped to a universal 8012 for the construction of my project. Your Floriani heat and gun topping. This is the topping that I like to use, especially with really dense designs, because it helps to make that design stand up off of the fabric. Floriani embroidery perfection tape. I think this is a must-have in your room. I use the embroidery perfection tape to hold things in place, including as I added my Floriani heat and gun topping, I just use a little piece of that tape to hold the heat and gun topping in place. A Floriani pressing cloth. The pressing cloth, when you get ready to, we're going to use RNK SoFab foam for this project, and this is another project that's new. Our SoFab foam is actually fusible, and when you read the instructions that come with the SoFab foam, it indicates that it is moisture. What the instructions say is that you're going to take a damp cloth, which would be your pressing cloth. I would lightly mist that cloth. I just lightly misted it with a water mister. Then you lay it on top of the fabric and press it in place. So actually the SoFab foam, the moisture will help your fabric to adhere to the SoFab foam. You will also need fabric. Oh, and also I included the RNK turning tool because I love this tool for turning anything inside out. And so because we're going to be creating a structure where we're going to turn it inside out, of course you're going to use your turning tool. Other items include fabric. You're going to fuse your dream weave to the back of your fabric. Now, also, if you want to make a custom appliance, you're going to take a photograph of it. So I have an additional handout that's in your folder, and it's just tips on how to take a photograph. And so if you had another appliance that you wanted to make a cover for, so let's say a sewing machine, and you want to create a custom cover for your sewing machine. You just take a picture of your sewing machine in profile. Or if you want to make a custom cover for a blender, or I mean anything that you want to make a custom cover for. If you take a picture of it, you bring it into the software and scale it, you can create that custom pattern for it. So let's go ahead now and get started with the software lesson. The first thing that I'm going to do, I have my software open, but I don't have a document open yet. My tools are all grayed out. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to click on the piece of paper to open up a new document. Now we're going to bring in over here, we're going to come down to the backdrop tool, which is right here. And this is what's called a tooltip. So if I hover my cursor, that tooltip pops up and tells me the name of the tool. I'm going to left click on the backdrop tool, and then you're going to navigate on your computer to the folder where this picture is stored. So we're going to go into the PC. We're going to come down to our C drive. We're going to open that. Under the C drive, we're going to open the folder titled Floriani. Double click, open up the designs folder. Double click, come down to free FTCU projects. Double click, come into February. Double click, you'll see February of 2017. Double click to open that. Now I select that image and click on open. Next, we are going to rescale the object. Notice that when I took the picture in profile. This is what's documented in the handout about taking the picture. I took the picture in profile, and what I was trying to do is get a real nice clean line of whatever it is that I'm taking a picture of. In this case, it's the appliance. A real clean line. So I put the stand mixer in front of a window. And normally we don't take a picture with a window in the background, but it's a great way to take a picture of a profile. I also included a ruler in the picture. So I laid the ruler down here in the bottom of the picture. The ruler is what's going to allow me at this point in time to accurately resize that. It gives me a very precise measurement tool. we left click on the backdrop. These are the tools that we have. So we could edit the backdrop. We could define the horizon. And what the horizon does is that if you'll notice, this is just a little bit skewed in the picture. So I can come in and use that define horizon and it straightens it. So you just pick something that's straight in the back and straighten it up. That's entirely up to you. The other tool, though, this is the one that we're looking at, is the define scale. So I'm going to select the define scale. I'm going to move into the backdrop, and you might want to zoom in. I'm going to use my magnifying glass right here to zoom in on that. And now I'm going to come back. I'm going to go back into the backdrop tool. So I have to come back and click on that backdrop. And I'm going to define the scale of that. So I right click to define scale. I come over to the very left side of the ruler, and you can start left or right. It's up to you. It doesn't make a difference. But I'm going to use that, and I'm going to left click and then come across the line. And all I'm doing is following the line, and I'm going to come over from the left edge of the ruler to the right edge of the ruler, right there. And this is why zooming in helps a little bit, so you can see that edge more carefully. I let go. Now, the Define Scale tool pops up, and this is where that ruler is 12 inches long. This is just something I thought up. It's like, you know what, if I include a ruler in the picture when I take it, it gives me something so that I can accurately set up the scale. And if you notice, that picture is pretty accurate. I might just bump that, but this ruler is 12 inches long, and I want it to be 12. If it were, let me just showcase this. What if I came across that line, and when I popped it up, it was 13 instead of 12? Then I would go in and I would change it. And a lot of times, depending on what you're using to take a picture. So I took a picture with a digital camera in high resolution. And so as I brought this backdrop in, there was no distortion, there's no compression, there's no skewing or resizing of the actual photograph. Conversely, if you use your cell phone to take a picture, which works, maybe when you send the picture to yourself, you go, oh, minimize the picture and make it smaller. You have to always, if this is the way that you're using the tool, you want to make sure that you take the time to define the scale. So that's what that does. And now I'm ready to move to the next part of the project. The next step is to change the transparency of the backdrop. The backdrop, this is just a photograph in the software. To change the transparency, make sure that you have the photograph or the backdrop. We're going to use the right terminology. I've got my backdrop selected. I move over to my properties box. In the properties box, now I can go ahead and this slider tool, as you slide it over to the lighter side and click on apply, it's going to adjust the transparency of that. The whole objective behind adjusting the transparency is that by making this lighter, when I come in and use my artwork tool right here to create my artwork over the outside lines, I'm going to trace around the outside here. I'm making a pattern to accurately cover this. By making the backdrop more transparent, I have more contrast to see the tools as I work. You also can use your Alt-S key to toggle that backdrop off and on. Step 4, we're going to digitize the outline of this mixer. I'm going to move in. I'm going to use my zoom to fit. And now I'm going to use my artwork tool. Underneath this tool, there's a little black diamond drop down, and there are 3 tools embedded in that single tool. Anytime you see one of those black diamonds, always click the drop down. It means there's additional tools in there. So the first tool is the line tool, the second tool is called the pen tool, and the third tool is the Bezier tool. I'm going to use the line tool. This is the tool that I use mostly. And as I use this tool, I'm going to come down to the bottom of the mixer. I'm going to do a left click. I'm going to move up to where the arc of the mixer starts. I'm going to left click. I'm now going to hold down my control key. With the line tool, when you hold your control key, it allows you to create an arc. And usually we do a 3-point arc. So here's the end of the arc. So I'm going to go, this is my first point, second point, control key down, third point, control key is still down, let go. So I've got a nice clean arc in there. Now I'm going to move over to where my next arc is going to start. I'm going to left click. And now I'm going to create a nice broad arc around the outside here. I want my cover. I store my mixer with the bowl on it, and I want to accommodate the cover with that bowl stored in there. So as I go through to create the arc, I want to plan out in my head. So I'm going to hold down my control key. I'm going to move about halfway through my arc, which is about right here. I've got my control key down. I left click. I come down. I left click. I've got a nice arc. I'm going to leave my control key down, and I'm going to come over and finish the arc right here. I release the control key. I come down to the bottom of the mixer. I'm going to taper it in just slightly. I'm going to left click. I'm going to move all the way over, and I'm going to left click right here. Now, currently that's open. I'm going to let my software close this shape. I move over to this tool right here, which is called Close Shape, and click. That automatically closed it. It's a wonderful tool. I'm going to now come over and adjust my pen width just a little bit. I'm going to bump it up to 2. Now, this is not in the instructions. I am only doing this so that you can better see the outline of my pattern. There you go. The joy of this project is that by bringing in the backdrop and validating in the software that the backdrop is an accurate representation of our actual object, in this case being the mixer. As I went around the outside here to create this shape, by having the mixer the precise size, this shape creates that pattern. This is now going to become my pattern. I'm going to click on the fill, and this is what I'm going to print. I'm going to come under my file menu, and I'm going to come down to print preview. That will bring me into my settings. I'm just going to navigate through here so that you can see the actual pattern. And if I had an even larger appliance and I went to print this, I could bring it into the software, make sure it's the accurate size. When I print it, automatically tiles it to the exact number of pages I need. Now all that's left, I'm going to print this on a piece of paper. When I get it onto my piece of paper, I'm going to cut it out. I'm going to line up these points. Let me go to the next page. See how those little points line up perfectly? I'm going to go to the next page. See, that will line up perfectly. And I will line those up, and this is the ultimate shape that I will have. And that is my pattern. Also, before you print, make sure that you click on the settings. Within the settings, make sure that you print the actual size. The color analysis, I like to leave the color analysis on there. If you click on print one page, the color analysis prints on the actual page of the design, which saves paper. Show crosshair, thick crosshair. I always make sure that I have a thick crosshair. The show crosshair to me is important because that gives me my center point and my markings in there. This box right here, if you are printing artwork, if artwork is a part of the design, if you deselect that, I want to demonstrate this because this may happen to you. Do you see how there's nothing there? And if I close this, my artwork is still there. That's what that setting does. So if you come to this screen and you do not have your artwork showing, make sure that you click on that artwork sign. And what I found is that you've got to close the dialog window in order to be able to see it. I am in the habit, I always check my print settings. The other thing you want to do before you print is come in and look at your actual printer settings. I emphasize this in every lesson that I put together, and I cannot emphasize it enough. You need to know that your printer settings override the software settings. And so in your printer, and the print setup that you have will be configured to your actual printer, and it will be different than mine unless you have the same printer. You want to make sure you come into your printer settings, and under the printer settings, under page setup, you want to look for, there's a little button in here usually that said, do you want to fit to page? And if you have that fit to page set up, it will override the software and will actually change the size of the design. So make sure that you check your printer settings. Okay? With that being said, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to print this, and I'm just going to print this onto regular paper. I'm not going to put this on template tearaway. I could, but it's unnecessary. We're just making a regular pattern. So this I would recommend printing onto your regular paper. Let me go ahead and close that now. We're now ready for step 5, and in step 5 is to prepare the design. Now, if you're following along your handout, as a part of step 5, this is where that software challenge comes in. And so in your handout, I've outlined some steps for the software challenge. I'm not going to cover that in this part of the project. So if you are interested in the software challenge, go to the very end of the video, and at the very end of the video, you'll see a demonstration on how I went about doing that. Step 6, this is prepare the embroidery design. So with that being said, the first thing that the instructions tell you to do is to open up this piece of artwork. So I'm going to go ahead right now and close this and open up a new document. I'm going to come over to my library. I'm going to go into my February 2017 library. And then in here, this is what it's talking about. So we would start off by bringing in our artwork, which is what this is. You can see right here on the sequence view window, that's artwork. And we're going to bring in the free designs. So the free designs that you have, I'm going to start off. This is your You Design It stick figure. There you go. Now, let me demonstrate to you. I'm going to open a new piece of paper, and I'm going to come over to my You Design It tool and click on that. This is not included in the instructions because you have to purchase this design collection. I'm going to come down into my collections to stick figures right here and demonstrate how this tool works. The first thing that you're going to do in the stick figures is you're going to start with a bottom. So as I scroll down so that you can see the various bottoms that are included, and I would encourage you, you own the software, purchase these collections because you can have a lot of fun with them. Let me demonstrate how I made the stick figure that you were given. I started with the bottom. Here we go right here. This is what's called a magnet. I'm going to go ahead and click on 3D view so that you can see as I build this. The second thing that you're going to do is add a top piece. So once I've started with a body, then you're going to move over to the right side of the screen to the elements. So here we go with the elements. So I'm going to add a top next. And you can have a lot of fun with these. So as I scroll down and I'm looking for various tops, and you have a wide assortment of those, I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom so that you can see the various tops that you're given. And the top that I selected was this one right here. Okay, so now I've got a top and a bottom. What's next? Well, the next thing that I did, once I have a top and a bottom, I come in and I need to add a head. So I go into my head elements, and as I scroll down looking at these, you'll see that you have a lot of different kinds. Coming down, the head that I ended up with was this head. Now I've got my body, my bottom, and my head. The next thing I need to do is add my hand elements. So for the left hand, if you go in and you look, as I scroll down, you'll see you have a wide assortment. Here's a camera, a suitcase. The hand that I gave you, because this is for a kitchen tool, I'm going to keep going, I know it's here, is this left hand that's holding the wooden spoon. I'm going to come to the right hand. As I scroll down on the right hand elements, you'll see that many are the same, I'm going to go all the way down and find the hand that you were given, and it's this one right here, the right hand with the heart. The last thing that we need to do, no, not the last, we need an ear, a left ear, a right ear, and we need a face. And I kept the face fairly simple. There you go. I don't think that's the one. There you go. So as you can see, you can have a lot of fun with these. You can spend hours and hours in these You Design It collections. Once I have the design ready, I'm going to click and say OK. So it automatically generates that design for me. Now, before we stitch this out, we're going to do a little bit of editing with this. So when you use the You Design It collection, you'll see right now, currently, I've got, it's only 11,000 stitches, but the number of color changes in there are 23. So I want to see if I can't diminish the number of color changes. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select all items. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to use this color elimination tool, and that says OK. The next thing that I did was I went in and I started doing this kind of an item. So I went in and said, okay, let's make the shirt and the skirt the same color. We're going to match. So I went in, there you go. So those became, and you have the ability within this to adjust the colors to anything that you would want. So I might go with a different flesh tone in here. And with that being said, I also want to make sure that I update the ears and the hands to that flesh tone. So once I add the color, it's in my palette up here. Let's make that one the same. Oops. I'm going to grab that one, make that. And so I went through and I made the color changes and optimized it the way that I wanted to there. So let's go back here. And let's do a color sort again. Okay, I've reduced 2 more colors. So now I'm down to 16 color changes. What else could I do? I think, in my opinion, I think you need to incorporate a little bit of analysis into using this tool. For instance, I noticed that I've got right here is the fill shape. Right here is the body, the black cover body of the dress top. Here's the hair and that, the outline of the spoon. This is the outline of the heart and the outline of the face. And I guess realistically, I'm thinking, could I make that so instead of having the machine stitch out this component and then come down and do the top stitching on there, what would happen if I bring that all the way to the bottom? So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go move to last, okay, because I do want that to stitch out last. I'm going to bring this one, I'm going to move it last. I'm going to look at this heart work, I'm going to move this last. And let's see what else. Definitely the bodice, move last. And I think finally the hair, move last. Okay, I want to see how this is going to stitch out. So I'm going to go through here. And I definitely, as I went through and made changes with this design, every time I made a change, I came over to my slow redraw to observe how that's going to stitch out. Because when you start manipulating how the order of these designs, you can mess up the design. So I've got this going. This is looking pretty good. There's my eyes. and then it comes in and it starts stitching out the dark background. So I'm looking for how to make this flow and to stitch out. So once I've got that going, I'll once again grab these items in the bottom from here to here. I've got those selected, and I'm going to use that color sort tool again, and it reduced those colors. So I really do like to point out that tool. I just definitely want to also go back through here. I want to observe how this is going to stitch out. It's looking good. Lastly, I did change this heart into an applique, and what I did with that one, I just went ahead and deleted the inside of the heart. I then came down and I took the outside of the heart right here. And don't you love how you have the ability to use your sequence view window to see those various elements and scroll down and select different areas in the design? I came down to the steel stitch right here, and I converted that to applique. And this is how easy it is to alter an existing design. I select steel, I come down, go, oh, let's make that applique. Now that is applique, and it will stitch out as that. So that's how I went about doing the design, design. I know that you're ready to visit your dealer and purchase your collection of stick figures for your You Design It tool. Lastly, I'll just briefly show you how to incorporate those designs in. Once you purchase the design collection, it comes on a CD. You'll place the CD into your computer. You then use the tool under the File menu called Import You Design It Gallery. You'll navigate to that CD with the You Design It. You're going to find a .udi file. .udi stands for You Design It. Navigate to that file, select it, and import it into the software, and your tool is ready to use. What we're going to do now is just use this shape, this pattern shape, as a tool for laying out our project. I've got my embroidery design here, and if you want to do the applique of the mixer, then we're going to bring that in and size that. Or if you're just going to place your stick figure on the cover, then I would leave it at that. I'm going to go over to my library tab, to that February folder, and back into designs. And I created this design myself. So I went ahead and gave it to you. I'm going to show this. This is actually the challenge software lesson, is digitizing this design. So if you're interested in how I did that, then you can watch the video at the end of this lesson. But if you would like to incorporate this applique design that I created into your project, I encourage you to do that. So if I want to bring in that mixer, I would add it here. And I'm just going to resize this. Normally when I resize a design, I use my transform tab, and I have an accurate idea of how large I want a design to be, whether it's 5 inches high or 3 inches high or anything like that. So what I'm doing this time, though, is I'm using the handles in the software to resize the design. This is not precise. This is actually more visual and aesthetic. How large do I want this stick figure to be on my design? How do I want to incorporate this? And for the completed design, I actually incorporated the bowl mixer as an applique file. And the last thing that I did is I added an initial in there. So I came in under my tools, I clicked, I dropped that in there. I thought this was going to be kind of cute. I added the initial K for Kathy, because this is Kathy's kitchen. And then I went ahead and resized that mixer file. Let me make sure I grab the right feature. And if I want to grab the mixer, let me go back and click on my tool here so that I can grab that if I want to resize that just a little bit. But as I said, the last thing that I added to my particular design was the letter K on my mixer, and that's how I completed this. Once I have my design ready to go, at this point, I would recommend that you do run your design through Save to Sew. That's this right here. What is your fabric that you're going to put it on? I actually put this on cotton quilting fabric, so I'm going to type a Q in here to come down to quilting. I did digitize this design, so I'm going to make sure that I select that. And then I would go through here and apply a new density setting. So I might encourage you to do that also with this design if you have any worries about it. Once I have my designs exactly the way that I want them, the last thing that I did, I'm going to select first my stick figure design. I'm going to do a right click and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to open up a new document. I'm going to right click and paste that in here. And now I'm going to print this. So I'm going to go into File. I'm going to go down to Print Preview. I always like to go into Print Preview to check my settings. I'm going to check the settings in there, print actual size, color analysis. If I want to print on one page, I'll demonstrate what that's going to do for you. I'm going to say OK. And this is my color analysis sheet. And I do like to include the color analysis sheet on the one page because it fills up the space in the bottom. I'm now going to go ahead and I'm going to print this, and I'm going to print this onto Template Tearaway. So I select Print and send it off to my printer. I'm going to go back to my original design. I'm going to grab the mixer over here that I made and that initial K. Make sure that you have that one. So from the mixer right here all the way down to the bottom, I'm going to copy that. Notice I'm using my sequence view window, and I did a shift click to select the individual items of everything that's in here. I'm going to open a new document. I'm going to right click. I'm going to paste that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm also going to print this on a piece of Template Tearaway. Because we're making a design, why did I separate these out into two separate documents to print? By separating them out, the software gives me the center marking for that particular design. If I go back to my original design here, if I go in under File and go into Print Preview, you're going to see it's going to read those two designs as one and include the artwork in there. And so this is not going to be an accurate size for me. So that's why I separate the designs out for printing. In order to print your project handout, you're going to go into your computer. So navigate to your C drive. Find the Floriani folder, just like we did when we brought in the backdrop. Go into the Designs, Free FTCU Projects, February and February of 2017. Within that folder, you'll find several handouts. One of them is for the project. There is also the tips and tricks for taking your own photograph. And then there's a third handout in there, and it's just the page out of the help files that talks about editing artwork. Step 8 is to prepare your fabric. Once you have your designs done, you're going to cut your fabric. And what I recommend is I laid my pattern down on top of the actual fabric, and then I gave it some leeway. So you'll see here with the ruler, notice I've got a lot of leeway over here and a lot of leeway over here. At this point, I'm going to cut the fabric. So this is the full fabric. It's folded in half. And I just laid my rotary cutter with my ruler straight down and cut straight across here and then cut it in half here. So now I've got my fabric for the front of my project and the back. Then you're going to transfer the markings from your pattern onto your fabric. So lay your pattern down on there. Use an erasable pen. I like to use friction pens or another pen of your choice. So maybe you have an air erase marker or a blue marker. I'm a little leery about those because once you touch them with the iron, they become permanent. So I love to use friction pens because they're not permanent. But you're going to go ahead and you're going to trace the pattern. So you can see right here, I went and I traced around the outside of the pattern piece, and then I transferred from the pattern piece all of my markings. So I've got my vertical center, my horizontal center, and then these diagonal markings on there. And I'm going to use these markings in the next step where I actually lay my pattern, my designs onto the fabric for placement. So now I'm ready to place the designs. I printed them onto template tearaway. I'm going to cut the designs out from the template tearaway. And I've seen people cut this very, very precisely. I didn't cut it precisely. I just kind of cut around the outside of the edge. I'm all about fast. But when you have that cut out, you're going to stick these designs down in their location. So you can see now I've transferred the designs to my fabric here. So I've got my designs. So what I did is, here's half of my cover, the other half of my cover. So I lined up this horizontal center marking with the horizontal center marking on my fabric. And that's how I use those. You may have a different system, but this is how I use the markings in there. Once I had my fabric marked, I'm going to select my threads. Now, once again, remember that your project is customized for what your fabric, your kitchen, your desires, everything else. And that's the beauty of doing something like this, is you have the ability to totally customize your project. That's one of the things I love. But I wanted to share this with you. This is a tip that I actually got from Debbie Homer Hoffheinz. I want to credit her with this. I did not come up with this. This is an organization tip. When she pulls her thread, remember I print the thread colors on the bottom of my sheet. I'm going to go over it. I'm going to pull my thread colors. I have my thread chart, and in order to do this, organization is the key. So all of my threads, and I have all of the thread colors, are organized in Floriani thread boxes, and I have my boxes organized according to my thread chart. When I get ready to pull my colors, I come over here, and here's the first color that I need, and it's Floriani 521. And that is in, when I came up to my chart and looked up color 521, so I came over here to find 521, and it tells me the row that it's in. It's in row 13. So I went down and used my color chart back here and wrote down the number of the row where every one of these colors was in there. Then it streamlines locating the threads for me, and it simplifies cleaning up. So when I get ready to clean up, all I have to do is go back to this, and I know exactly what drawer that thread belongs in. And so I just go over and put the thread away. And I'm all about organization in my sewing room. I'm just like everybody else. I will never show you a picture of my sewing room because I think it's a disaster. But if I strive to be organized. Organization saves time. And so if I can pull my thread quickly and put it back when I'm done, it makes the next project easier. Now we're ready to embroider the designs. We have our thread pulled, we've got our fabric marked, we've got everything laid out in there. We're going to hoop Floriani Perfect Stick Stabilizer. This is my method of embroidering the fabric. I'm going to use Perfect Stick Tearaway Stabilizer. You hoop it paper side up. So here's my paper, and I'm going to score that paper, and I just use a stiletto. You can use a T-pin. Before I had a stiletto, I actually used a seam ripper. So you lightly score the paper. Don't get too aggressive. If you score it too deeply, you're going to put a hole through your stabilizer in the back, and then it's not going to do its job. So I score the paper, and I like to do a big X through the middle of the hoop. And then I score entirely around the perimeter of my hoop. And then I remove the paper and throw it away. I'm going to reveal every spot of sticky surface in here. And then I'm going to lay my fabric down and smooth it out. So place the fabric into the hoop. So this is my method that I use. I'm going to go back. Here's my hoop. And then this is the grid that goes with the hoop. So I take the grid and I lay it over the design, and I line up my vertical and my horizontal lines. Then I take embroidery perfection tape and I tape the grid directly onto the fabric so that it doesn't shift. Then I pick up my fabric, I move it over to my hoop, I lay it down and press it in place. Next, we're going to move the embroidery hoop over to the machine, and we're going to align the designs in preparation for embroidery. So with your template tearaway, you have this really nice thick cross line, and that shows the exact center point of the design. And I make this joke when I go out and teach workshops in the stores. I said, you may have a machine that has a really nice laser that pinpoints the center, or you may have a camera. I have this thing called a needle. And so what I do is I move my hoop to my machine. I load up the embroidery design. I go into the center of the embroidery design and I drop my needle to see where that is. And then I have knobs, and so I'll just move the hoop until I get my needle to drop in the exact center point of that design. I've been using this technique, and I have to tell you that between the template tearaway, lining it up in there, and then using this, I now precisely place designs, and I've done large projects and small projects. It's just absolutely amazing what template tearaway does for you. All of a sudden, my designs are not wonky. Next, we're going to do a technique. This is called floating stabilizer. So the design that we're looking at is actually kind of a dense design. So what I'm going to do, I chose to add a floater layer of stabilizer. So when you go through Save to Sew, it's telling you what you need to do. If you have an overly dense design, and this design, the little stick figure design, has lots of fill stitches in there. To be safe, I went ahead and I added a second layer of stabilizer. So I cut a piece of Floriani medium tearaway stabilizer, just a little bit larger than the design, and then I gently lifted up the hoop and slid. This is that second piece of stabilizer, and I slid the stabilizer underneath the hoop before I press the button. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add Floriani Heat and Gone topping. I like to use embroidery perfection tape, and so you'll see right here, I just take a little piece of that tape. Here's my Heat and Gone topping. You lay it on top of the fabric. I tape it in place with the Floriani perfection tape, and I don't use a lot of tape, just a little bit to kind of keep it from shifting, and then I embroider the design. Once you have your first design done, remove your fabric, remove the hoop, remove the fabric, peel away the Heat and Gone topping off of the top, remove the stabilizer off the back of the design, and then repeat for additional designs. And I say repeat only because I do encourage people, as I create these projects of the month, I try to make it open-ended so that you can create a design that is personalized for you. I don't want you to just duplicate what I did. I want you to challenge yourself, and I want you to create your own design. If you have ownership in the design, you'll like it. Construction tips. I wanted to include some of those. We're ready to construct it, and we're going to cut the pattern pieces. So I've got my fabric embroidered. Make sure that you press your fabric so that it's nice and smooth. And then we're going to cut the front and the back of the pattern. Make sure that you know, I've got my pattern, and so the back has to have a reverse. And when you go into the pattern piece, it has a little bit of a shape to it. Make sure that you add a seam allowance. And so I've got a seam gauge, or you can use a cutter. But what I did is I just ran this around the edge of the pattern piece and used my friction pin to mark the fabric, and then I connected those lines, and that's where I cut. So make sure that you add a seam allowance, because as we digitize the pattern, we did not include a seam allowance. For the side pieces, so I've got a front piece to the pattern, I've got a back piece. I need a side piece. And what I did is I measured the perimeter of the pattern, and this is just the crazy way I did it. I used a tape measure. I just laid the tape measure along the edge of the pattern piece, and I added little clips. And I clipped it in place to hold it, and then the tape measure just went around the outside, and when I got done, I had the measurement of the perimeter of the front of the pattern. And then I cut a strip of the fabric to match that, and I made it 6 inches wide. The next thing we need to do, so we've got our pattern pieces. So we now have 3 pieces of fabric. We have the front of the cover, we have the back of the cover, and we have the side strip. Now we're going to cut our Sew Fab foam. So I wanted to mention Sew Fab foam if you have not used this before. This is a fabulous product. It has great body. It really adds nice structure to the project. It is beige in color. That way it blends with all of your different fabrics. And one of the features of our Sew Fab foam that I absolutely love is that it is fusible on one side. Now I do want to mention this. Please read the directions for fusing this, and you may want to test it. When you fuse your fabric to the foam, you will need to use moisture. So moisture is going to help activate that adhesive on there. So make sure you read the directions for the SoFab foam. I'm going to cut duplicate pattern pieces with the SoFab foam. And so you need a large, for the project that I made, I got the large package of SoFab foam. I placed the foam fusible side up. Then I laid my fabric down on top of the SoFab foam. And then using my pattern pieces that I have already cut, then I cut my SoFab foam to match. Once I had my pattern pieces cut in my SoFab foam and my fabric, then I went through the process of fusing the fabric to the SoFab foam. I've got my SoFab foam in place. I'm ready to stitch to get together. I'm going to use an 80-12 universal needle. So I swapped out my needle in my machine. I'm ready to stitch this. Pin or clip the side. So here's my side. Here's the cover piece in there. You're going to pin or clip them together. I moved away from using pins because I found that with pins, you always have a little bit of puckering. And also, I always poke myself, then I bleed, and I get blood on my fabric. I started using these little clips, and you can find them anywhere, and I've even used binder clips before to hold things together. But I use clips to hold this and placement. And just so you know, when you cut your side piece, you may have to adjust the length of it. Using a tape measure to measure the perimeter there is not precise. I did have to adjust the length over here, even though I had measured out there. Finish sewing your project together. Finish the bottom as desired. What I mean by that is it's up to you. I did not include instructions in there. I finished mine. I do have a serger. I ran the bottom through the serger, folded it underneath, and then did a top stitch to hold that in place. So that is up to you. As far as embellishments go, this is what I really feel makes the project yours. I think it reflects your personality. Add ribbons, buttons, trims. I like to add Swarovski crystals, and so you'll see this is just one of the areas where I added crystals underneath the ears here to represent earrings and a little bit of embellishment along the trim and the neckline. Let's get social. Facebook. We have a very active Floriani embroidery group. If you have not joined that, I really encourage you to do that. Also, you can, if you're on Instagram and you post up there, my Instagram handle is @KCFerrel, also on Twitter @KCFerrel. And if you hashtag it February Project or Floriani Embroidery, I will see that. If you have any questions about the project, please feel free to email me. It's kathyf@rnkdistributing.com. I would also like to encourage you to tune in next month for the March project. It's going to be from this collection of backyard birds. I think you'll be really excited about it. Also, stay tuned. At the end of this video, if you remember, I'm going to demonstrate the software challenge activity. Until next month, this is Kathy Ferrel. Thank you so much. I am now going to demonstrate the software challenge. The software challenge, we're going to digitize the shape of the mixer, and this is what we will end up with. So I wanted to demonstrate the techniques for doing this. I'm going to start with my backdrop. I'm going to use my line tool. I'm going to start on the lower left-hand side. I'm going to left click. I'm going to Control key to give me a curve. And I'm going to come around, Control key right here, straight, Control key, this is straight. I'm going to come around the side, Control key here. Once again, straight, Control key here, straight, and come down. Now, I will tell you this. If you make a mistake, you can use your backspace key to, and every time you hit the backspace key, it's going to go back. You can use your backspace key. And in order to get nice clean points, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put a straight vector shape. Now I'm going to go curved here, and I'm going to go back to straight here to get those clean lines. I'm going to come straight across here, come back up. This is straight. Now I'm going to control to start angling in this curve. Down to the bottom of the mixing bowl. Over here to the side. To get a nice point, I release that. And then I'm going to come over to the bottom here and do a closed shape. So now I've got, and I'm just going to bump up this line so that you can see that a little bit more. If I felt that this was needing any kind of enhancements, I could go back in and use my shape tool and clean that up. So that's the first part of the design. The next thing that I did, and I'm going to go ahead right now, and I'm going to turn off the mixer bowl. We are going to digitize a bar that's going to come down underneath this. And for that, I'm going to use a rectangle. And I'm just going to come in and drag and drop a little rectangle here. I'm going to change the color of that so that it separates it out, and it doesn't really make any difference what color it is. All I want to do is make sure that I have this on two separate layers. I'm going to go ahead now. I'm going to turn that one off, and I'm going to digitize the shape of the bowl. For that, I'm going to use my line tool. I need to have the bowl open, and I'm going to start at the bottom on this left-hand side to make the base of the bowl. I'm going to make a nice clean corner there, and now I'm going to hold down the control key for my curve. I'm going to come up in here. I'm going to release that control key. I want a nice sharp point. And now I'm going to re-engage the control key. Once again, I release the control key so that I get a nice sharp point right here. I come back down, re-engage the control key to give me a curve. Release the control key. I want a nice clean point at the bottom. And I'm going to release, right-click to finish that. Let me bump up the size of that so that you can see a little bit more. And let me once again change the color. Let's go back and turn on all of those layers. And I'm going to hide my artwork. There you go. And that's how I digitize the artwork to create the mixer. I would just come back in here, move this around. There you go. Now to convert this to stitches, I wanted this to be applique. I wanted to embed fabric into the project. And so once you have artwork, the nice thing is that you have the ability to use all of your auto-digitize tools here. Once you have vector artwork. So in order to convert this to applique, I'm going to come down to the applique tool in the Stitch Effects toolbar, and I'm going to click on that one. I like to change the applique density just a little bit. I mean, it's really, really heavy, and I like to modify that applique in there. The next thing is on here, on this bar, I decided that that should be I think I made it a standard fill. I came down, I changed it to a motif fill. No, I didn't. It was a fancy fill. I made a fancy fill. And then I just started experimenting with all the different fancy fills in here. And I think I actually ended up, and this is a matter of personal preference, I just started I put this on 3D so that I could see it. And I just started creating different kinds of fancy veils. And once again, I also bumped up the density in there. And you can change the emboss scale in there. And every time you make these little changes in there, you're going to get a different result. And so I played around with that until I got it looking where I wanted it. And then the last thing I did was the mixer bowl, and I also wanted that to be applique. Once I had this designed, then I had to really think about, well, how is this going to stitch out? So realistically, I think the first thing I want to stitch out is the fill stitch. So I'm going to make that at the top here, and that's going to be the first thing that stitches out with this design. The next thing is that stitching out currently is the mixer. That order is not going to work. I need to change that. So I'm going to bump this up. I'm going to drag it right above the mixer. I'm going to move it up so that the second thing that stitches out is the bowl. I also want to make sure that when that bowl stitches out that I have nice coverage down here. So I'm going to zoom in on this area. I'll just turn off this, and I'm just going to double check this. And if I needed to alter the length of it, I would come back and use my edit path tool. And all I need to do is just got to find the right vector shape in there. So let me grab that point, because this is my stopping tool. And so I might make that a little bit longer and then click off of it. And let's turn my mixer back on now just to double check. So see, I've got a nice overlap in there, and that actually might be a little too much. I might want to go back in and change that. The last thing that I wanted to demonstrate for you is that if you look at the design that you're given, I've got a little decorative motif around the bottom of the bowl. Now, how did I do that? Let's go back into the software, and we're going to have to ungroup this applique. So I'm going to right click on there and do this. I'm going to break up applique. Now what you'll see is that here's my bowl. Okay. But once again, I want to make sure that that's going to stitch out last. Now I'm going to go ahead and hide the cover stitch on that. And in order to make that decorative motif stitch around the rim of the bowl, I'll come back in, and I could come up here and start with a stitch, but I really prefer to bring artwork in and then convert the artwork to stitches. So I'm going to start off over here. I'm going to hold down my control key, go halfway through. I've got my control key down so that when I finish over here, I've got a nice curve, and now I'm going to enter in there. I'm going to zoom to selection. I just want to double check and see if I've got too much overlap or not enough. And I might turn my applique back on just to verify that. Okay, that's looking pretty good. The last thing that I need to do is I'm going to convert, well, it's not the last thing, but I need to convert that to a motif stitch. So I select motif stitch down here under my Stitch Effects toolbar, and then I'm just going to come down and choose whatever stitch pattern I think looks good. So for the video here, I'm going to put the hearts in there. I might bump up the pattern size just a little bit. I might change the spacing in there just a little bit. You know, so you have complete control over what you're doing here. And then I need to make sure that decorative stitch needs to stitch out. Here, this is the fabric placement. This is the tack down. And I want this motif stitch to stitch on the fabric after I lay it down, but before the cover stitch comes back on top. And that's how I created the applique that you were given this month. So I hope you enjoyed this demonstration, and I hope that you'll give it a try. You too can create your own custom embroidery designs with Floriani Total Control U software. You have ultimate control.